And that takes a couple of seconds. Done, and that should be up and running. Okay, so we're live on YouTube. And recording, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our quarantine Chatauqua. And I want to thank Preston for bringing that idea. We were at our board meeting trying to decide how we were going to call this, because it's not a potluck, because we can't be together in person right now. So he came out with this brilliant idea, and I really, really want to thank him for reminding us of this movement building initiative that started in the late 1800s and was a way of doing like popular education and building movement with children and mothers and workers. So if you haven't had a chance to research on it, I mean, I'm sure you all know about it. Some of you grew up in similar spaces. So thank you, Preston, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I invite you to bring your dish, your drink of preference. We want this to be a night where we can share in the ways that we can. We did invite a guest speaker, and we have a wonderful group of musicians. We have Elena Clever and we have Adolfo Romero, who are wonderful artists, not only musicians, they are actually work in different type of art, and they all donated items for our silent auction. So I want to thank them for that as well. They're not only contributing tonight to our gathering with their music, but also through their art. So thank you for that. I'm going to stop there. Well, I think all of you know me. I'm Rebecca Zuniga. I'm the director of the Denver Justice and Peace Committee. I see all familiar faces right now on the little tiles. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to let Amy Solada, who is one of our board members, explain a little bit about the silent auction. And I'll be putting some instructions about it on the chat. You're welcome to check it out now or later. It will be open till midnight on Monday.
Awesome. Rebecca, if you could maybe make it so that I can share my screen. It says that the host has disabled it. Okay. So anyway, the silent auction. We had a silent auction earlier this year at our awards night, and after much popularity, it is back after everyone loved it so much. So, hold on, I'm just trying to share my screen with you. Ugh. Seems that I can't. I don't know why, but okay, we'll put this up on the screen at some point today. But essentially, if you recall, you'll basically go to the website that's www.32auctions.com/Chatauqua. I'm going to put it in the chat right now.
Try again, Amy, and see if it works now.
Yeah, I think that it's on my end. I think it's a problem with my computer and not Zoom itself. Okay, thanks. So you'll be led to this page, which has all of our items on it. So Rebecca, I think it's sharing your screen, but it's sharing everything. Yeah. Okay, so it'll show you all of our items, and you'll just kind of scroll down. You can click on this button over here on the left that says view all items. And then once you open that up, it'll show you all the items that we have for auction. And at that point, you can click on an item, you can bid on it, And we have a series of, you can either pay by credit card or pay by check in the mail, or pay on our website or by PayPal. So there's a number of different ways that you can donate. And we'll be also sharing a different document that's a little bit longer in the chat in case anyone has questions on it, or if they didn't do it earlier this year at awards night. I know there's some great items like, gifts from Latin America and also some wine. I know that was really popular last time. And so if anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to ask me. You can either chat me in the chat, or my phone number is here if you want to text me or call me during the event. So thank you so much for your support, and I hope you have fun bidding. And thanks for your patience as we work on some of the technical difficulties. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Amy. We'll be putting some more information in the chat, and thank you for your patience. It's the first time I do the tech. So we don't have our amazing team of people from the SOA Watch team that helped us at award night. So this is my first time juggling with it. So thank you for your patience. And so I would like us to open the space to our awesome musicians. So I'm gonna let Elena go first with one song, and then Adolfo, si tú puedes ir después de Elena, Adolfo will share one song after Elena, and then Margie will take over.
Let me just take a minute to tune again, because I have this wood stove going. So if you could just say something for a couple of minutes.
Sure. Yeah, so Elena is going to share with us some music from a wonderful musician from Nicaragua that passed recently. So they were close friends, and so she thought that this would be a great opportunity for to share his music. So thank you, Elena.
Yeah, thank you. This is a song written by Chava Bustos, Salvador Bustos. He only had one recording out called Tragaluz, but his niece sent me a couple of three songs that never were published, but you can find Tragaluz online. And there's also a couple of podcasts in Spanish about him in homenaje, in homage to him. On Centroamericanto, it's called, if you look for podcasts on Spotify or wherever you find them. But this one is called Juntos para Vencer. Absurda frontera, los ojos abiertos al tiempo, quemándolo, desde el fondo de la historia, dos caminos que hay que recorrer. Desde entonces, lo tuyo y lo mío es golpear. Ayer con el hacha de piedra, ahora con nuestra unidad. Firme bandera, los brazos para hacer tu guerra, para vencer. Sacrificio de una era por los hijos de la eternidad. Tu consigna, mi objetivo, nuestro único destino. Habremos de ir haciendo de carnes abiertas la paz. El eco del tiempo sacude en Vietnam el corazón nuevo de tu rebeldía, el nuevo peligro. Ellos lo impusieron que ataquen. Tu nombre les destruirá, tu nombre les destruirá. Venceremos tu muerte, dirás con tu sangre la nuestra. Liberación, que buscando mis estrellas vi tu herida hurgando en el sol, que por este ir arrando estas tierras de luz, dos surcos de amor se han vuelto a encontrar. Es un solo surco de sangre con todos los pueblos del mundo, de gloria con todos los hombres que hoy buscan la vida en tu luz, El Salvador. Chava Bustos, presente.
Presente. Gracias, Elena. Adolfo, ¿estás listo?
Aló, ¿me escuchan? Aló, ¿me escuchan?
Sí,
Sí.
te escuchamos bien clarito, Adolfo. No te vemos, pero te escuchamos.
Justo estaba,
No te vemos.
deme un par de minutitos porque justo llegué hace poco a la casa, me confundí, pensé que era las 6:30, pero solo un par de minutos.
Dale. Ok, para mientras platicamos un poco.
Listo.
Got it. So Adolfo needs a couple of minutes. So I'm going to remind you that we have the silent auction. We are trying to put some information in the chat, and we'll get that to you in a second. I want to thank everyone for being here. We have a birthday girl today that doesn't want me to say it, so I'm not going to say her name, but some of you know who it is, so happy birthday. Feliz cumpleaños, querida. So thank you for being here tonight with us, always sharing your time and your special moments with us, which is great. I see some other folks have joined us. Jane, welcome. And I'm quite sure who her iPad is, but welcome to our Chatauqua tonight. If you can put your name there, would be great. If not, we'll have a moment to share a little bit more. Michelle is here. Welcome, Michelle. Nice to see that you're joining us. And Gabriela, and I see Lily there. ¿Cómo estás? Welcome. Someone is doing a lot of exercise there, so using their time. Welcome. This is what we want, and it's like it's a feeling at home, right? Soon, we will be able to be together in the same room. That's not through the computer. So, so excited to see all of you joining us tonight. And also after Adolfo, our beloved Margie will be introducing our guest speaker that's joining us from Nicaragua. Maria Hamlin Zuniga, that will be giving us an update on what is going on in Nicaragua, but also in the region. So thank you, Marty, for taking that job, and Maria for being here with us tonight. Cuando estés listo, Adolfo, estamos listos para ti. Okay, Adolfo is just getting his music ready. There we go. I see. Ya te vemos, Adolfo. Bienvenido. Pues subirle a la
Gracias, gracias. Hola.
cámara. Que te veamos.
Hola, hola.
Welcome, Adolfo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. ¿Cómo están? Veo varias caras conocidas. Bueno, quisiera compartir. It is okay if I speak Spanish or just English or Spanglish.
¿Cómo te sientas cómodo? ¿Cómo te sientas cómodo? La mayoría entiende.
Ok, voy a tocar un tema de mi país. Para los que no me conocen, vengo de Chile. He estado viviendo acá por unos años y, bueno, tengo un vínculo bien especial con Denver for Justice and Peace. Son bueno, he sentido como el apoyo a la comunión de ideas y la comunión política en mucho sentido y bueno, quisiera compartir algo de mi país. Lo más estoy tratando de descifrar dónde hay una vibración por acá entre mis cosas. Ok. Voy a tocar algo de un cantor que se llama Rolando Alarcón. Pertenece a uno de los cantores del periodo del canto nuevo en Chile. Y la canción se llama Si Somos Americanos. Y cuando digo esto, si somos americanos, no estoy hablando de Estados Unidos, sino que estoy hablando de América, el continente.
Somos americanos, somos hermanos, señores, tenemos las mismas flores, tenemos las mismas manos. Si somos americanos, seremos buenos vecinos, compartiremos el trigo, seremos buenos hermanos, bailaremos marinera, rezados a samba y son, si somos americanos, seremos una canción. Si somos americanos, seremos una canción. Somos americanos, no miraremos fronteras, cuidaremos las semillas, tiraremos las banderas. Si somos americanos, seremos todos iguales. El blanco, el mestizo, el indio y el negro son como tales. Bailaremos marinera, rezados a samba y son. Si somos americanos, seremos una canción. Si somos americanos, seremos una canción.
Eso.
Gracias,
Gracias.
Adolfo. Gracias, Adolfo. Y vamos a volver a la música en un rato. Ahora vamos a pasar a Margie y vamos a escuchar un poco sobre lo que está ocurriendo en Centroamérica y vamos a regresar después para seguir compartiendo música y arte. Gracias.
Sí, claro. Un placer.
Thank you. It's great to see everyone. At least we get to see each other's faces, even if we don't get to hug each other. So I am really, really pleased to welcome our presenter. She is such a wise woman from Central America, has so much experience and great politics, and her life has been with public health and politics there. And I'm going to introduce her in a minute. What I want to do first is show you a PBS News story. It's short, 5.5 minutes, that I think gives an idea of what Maria is going to talk about with the devastation that's happening in Central America, in this case, particularly in Nicaragua and Guatemala.
Central America in almost the same location. Hurricane season ends 1 week from today, and this one set records. 30 named storms and 13 hurricanes. For those already living under the specter of COVID-19 after the storms, the question now is of sheer survival. Nick Schifrin is back with this report.
This was supposed to be Virginia Morazan Mesa and her family's journey home. Instead, it's a return to nothing.
Here was the kitchen. We had a living room, 2 bedrooms, and the hallway.
This beach is where their house once stood.
It's only sand that's left. What else can I tell you? Nothing's left, not even the pole, nothing. And it hurts because I've been left on the streets, entirely on the streets.
Puerto Cabezas, also known as Bilwi, bore the brunt of Nicaragua's strongest storm ever. Hurricane Iota slammed Nicaragua's east coast last week with wind gusts of 155 miles an hour. Homes pulverized into piles of lumber. Streets flooded. As water surged in, Mesa and the residents in these low-lying areas had no choice but to evacuate by boat. They crammed into nearby shelters to ride out the storm, hoping their homes survived. Many didn't.
I've been shaken. I'm not okay. I've been left tormented because this hurricane, I felt, was very strong. Too strong.
It was the second Category 4 storm that hit the same coast in 2 weeks. Hurricane Eta struck just 15 miles north of Iota's landfall. The hurricane's damage extended well beyond northeastern Nicaragua, from Panama to southeastern Mexico. Torrential rains engorged rivers and left huge swaths of land underwater. In some parts, the downpours triggered deadly landslides. In Guatemala, the village of Queja, a mountainside, gave way and buried dozens of people. After rescue workers were called off, the area was deemed Camposanto, sacred land for the dead. Guatemalan government crews flew to isolated villages to distribute aid, but they haven't even reached places like San Juan Cotzal, so the local Ixil Maya community have to save themselves. On Sunday, volunteers from the local Catholic Church collected food and donations, but delivering that aid is a challenge when the storms destroyed bridges that used to connect 20 communities. Maria Toma talked to us late last week.
There have been a lot of landslides, major losses to property, and communities have now been left out of touch.
Toma visited homes to document the storm's impact. She kept the community apprised through a local media collective. They say the county never had the resources to cope with a storm the magnitude of Eta.
No hay cuerpos de bomberos.
There are no firefighters, either volunteers or from the municipality. There are no relief agencies. Families woke up only to sink their feet into water that was already running inside the house. That's how Eta took us by surprise.
Iota brought only more devastation. Its rains lingered over the weekend, killing more livestock and turning cornfields into lagoons just weeks before harvest time.
There is a concern going into next year, 2021. How will families eat? Where will they get money to eat? Where will they get the corn, the beans? What is most heavily consumed here?
Across the region, hundreds of thousands are living in shelters. Their concerns of COVID-19 put on pause.
What are we to do without a home, without a bed, without dishes? We don't have anything.
With COVID-19, it's always a balancing act between evacuating people safely and ensuring that they're, on higher ground or in shelters to protect them from the hazards of these kinds of hurricanes.
Kaylee Ober manages Refugees International's climate displacement program. She fears authorities haven't been able to offer COVID mitigation like hand washing, temperature checks, or social distancing.
What we're seeing in the region here is a little more ad hoc and a little more haphazard, unfortunately. And so what we might find is more people have been put at risk to COVID due to evacuation, but only time will tell to what extent that really is.
Early reports in Honduras already show high positivity rates. Around the city of San Pedro Sula, as many as 100,000 flood victims crammed into more than 80 shelters. But even that's not enough. 500 people are now living under this highway overpass. They have no running water.
People are facing displacement due to the hurricanes, and it will be even harder for them to build back or bounce back from that devastation and impact because COVID-19 has made their livelihoods pretty precarious and tenuous already.
Slammed by the year's most powerful Atlantic hurricane and the pandemic, storm victims face an uncertain and treacherous road to recovery, and many of them have nowhere to go. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schiffer.
Okay, and with that pretty devastating picture, I want to welcome Maria Hamlin Zuniga. She has lived in Central America since 1968 as a public health educator and activist, has founded several health networks and NGOs in the region. She's lived mostly in Nicaragua, but also other countries, and currently works with the People's Health Network in Latin America and globally on health as a human right. So welcome, Maria. So I think Maria is going to talk to us for about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Good evening, everyone. Some of you are people I know, and it's really nice to see you there. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Margie. After watching that and devastation, it's even harder for me to talk about the things I want to talk to you about. because if I'm just talking and not showing you pictures, you might not have any idea. I was thinking as I was watching the film that every single year I have lived in Central America, there has been a disaster of one kind or the other. We have earthquakes, we have volcanic eruptions, we have hurricanes, we have devastating storms of many kinds. Even when it isn't a hurricane, when the rain comes and falls for so many days, then there's all the problem of the flooding and the landslides and the loss of the production of the people. Hurricane season comes at the same time that the people are getting ready to harvest some of their crops, which makes it even more difficult. I think it's important to see these disasters in a broader context. Disasters are not just natural. They're created by human behavior. And that's why I was glad to see on that film that one of the people there is representing an organization that's working on climate change. Because basically, all of what we are suffering from right now is because of human interference with nature. We wouldn't have landslides if we didn't have open pit mining, if we didn't have deforestation. And all of these are these extractive industries that we have in our region are just exacerbating the situation in our country, so that when something comes along like rain or wind, then it does more damage than it would if we were respecting nature and what nature should mean to us. I say this because here in Latin America, in the People's Health Movement, we talk about our commitment to el buen vivir, to life in plenitude. And we talk about the fact that we are part of nature. And yet capitalist consumption depends upon the exploitation of nature and people. No? And so it's very hard for us to separate here what happens to nature from what is happening to human beings. And we try to look at health in a perspective of biocentric, and I'm starting to think in Spanish, I'm sorry, a biocentric approach to health rather than an anthropocentric approach to development. That's because we are saying that we as human beings are part of nature, and we're not going to be able to live as part of nature without respecting our Mother Earth. And that is one of the driving principles of our People's Health Movement here in Latin America. The People's Health Movement is a worldwide movement. It was founded 20 years ago in December in Sabah in Bangladesh. And we're celebrating those 20 years over the world and over our region. We're preparing in our region testimonies of people from our different countries. And just a few weeks ago, we had here in Central America an assembly where we involved people from Chiapas, from the rest of Central America, and Guatemala and the Dominican Republic to come together for 3 days and talk about how we're working to protect our Mother Earth and what it is that we can do. And some of those people were speaking to us from areas that had been ravaged by the hurricane, had been ravaged by the floods and the winds that followed the hurricane in all over our region. And one of the things that came out of that discussion, and the collateral discussion about COVID in our countries, is that because we have been victims of this human-generated change in our climate, people have been trying to do things together over the years to be able to work with their communities. They're health promoters. They are agents of change in their communities. They're midwives or comadronas, as we call them. And there are other curers who work in the communities. And when the official ministries of health or other government agencies cannot get to these communities like you saw there, then these people have been trained. Actually, one of the important programs for training people began after the Hurricane Mitch. In 1998, we had a devastating hurricane, and the winds itself didn't do the damage. It was the fact that for 15 days, the hurricane storm was over our countries of Central America. And in many places in Nicaragua and in Honduras, the rivers changed their course and entire villages disappeared. And one of the important factors that we learned from Mitch was that people have to be prepared. They have to know what to expect and what to do in the case of a disaster, because they aren't going to have a government there to help them. So a number of us were involved in starting a Central American initiative to train people to meet disasters, to mitigate disasters, to know and understand why disasters happen, and how to evaluate disasters after they happen, so to carry out the necessary rehabilitation in their areas. And one of the things that we were commenting with one of my friends the other day is that here in Nicaragua, after the 2 hurricanes, the only people who were in the communities doing the work were the health promoters and the parteras, and many of them, almost all of them, had been trained in this disaster preparedness project that went on for over 10 years. Over 10 years. That means there are generations of people who have learned what to do and how to manage things. And one of the things we noticed is that how when people heard that the hurricane was coming, they packed up their things, they used the plastic properly, packed everything up, and were able to save some things. Obviously, the woman who lived there on the shore, the only thing that the people on the shore can do is pack up and get away, because the storm surges and the wind is just devastating. And so they have to know that ahead of time. And with a hurricane, you can prepare ahead of time. With a volcanic eruption, you can prepare ahead of time because the earth starts shaking beforehand and gives you warning. The earthquake is something else again. It's hard to prepare for that, but there are things that we can do in the immediate disaster. So I think one of the important lessons that we've learned over the years is that it is the community that will help the community. It's not the governments, not even the local governments. They wait on somebody to come in from outside to help them. And there's no way to get to so many of these places. Even in the first storm, San Pedro Sula was entirely flooded. They had no municipal preparation. That's the second biggest city in Honduras. Why don't they have disaster preparation in a city that's so prone to have this kind of disaster sometime or other? That's a responsibility of municipal governments, and yet they're not prepared to do it. But people were prepared to do it, and this is what we noticed talking with our friends throughout the region, is that it was the communities who responded. Now, the disasters of the hurricanes came on top of other disasters. And I'm going to talk briefly about COVID. COVID in the region has been dealt with in different ways in different countries. Some countries declared lockdowns and severe lockdowns. In Nicaragua, there was never a lockdown. There was never any recognition that COVID was going to be a serious problem. I went to a meeting, an international public health meeting in Bangkok in late January of this year. when I went to Bangkok, they were already preparing for what was to come. The airport was already checking people when they came in, and they had data on where we were going, and they wanted to know if we got sick, if we would notify them. Even in Bangkok at the end of January, people were wearing masks. Not when I went in to the airport, but on my way out, 1 week later, everybody was wearing a mask. Nobody was saying, why am I wearing a mask? They were aware of what it would signify for that country to come under the threat of the COVID pandemic, and they were ready to deal with it. We talked about it at the conference. Then I came back to Central America, and we didn't have the first cases reported until about the middle of February. They began to report cases here. And of course, like every other disease that comes in, it comes in from somewhere else, according to the authorities. Nothing can ever originate in your own country for some reason. Look at the United States. And so what happened is that in the other countries, there was a lockdown, and here there wasn't a lockdown. And during the very early days, by March, I believe, a group of public health experts in this country decided to set up something that we don't have in any other country of Central America. It's an interdisciplinary scientific committee that was set up to study the emergency of COVID, to study the disease, and to try to make recommendations to the Ministry of Health. The people on this committee are doctors, are epidemiologists, there are teachers, psychologists. It's interdisciplinary, and they really work together. And I think Rebecca will put up on the chat some of the organizations that I'm talking about. That's one I want you to be aware of. In fact, those of you who understand Spanish might be very interested in the video that they made on the 7th of December. It was a conference, a press conference taking place in Zoom. And they tried to warn people that even though there is a tendency to think that the emergency has passed here because the hospitals are not full of patients, or there are not people being buried at secret burials at night, there still is COVID. The government does not recognize COVID. The only place that there are tests is at the Ministry of Health, and each test costs $150. That's more than most people earn. Most of the people in this country earn in a month. Yeah. And so that's where the tests are done. You can have them done, you can pay for them. If you're traveling out of the country, you must take a test in order to leave. And you must have a test before you can come back. But there's not much travel because we don't have any bus services anymore. We had no airlines for 10 months. And now only one airline has decided to come back to Nicaragua, and that's Avianca. So otherwise we are isolated. During the first months, this interdisciplinary committee did a lot of work on the media. They worked with independent news channels on television, and they had a lot of reports about what people could do. You know what you have to do. You have to wash your hands, you have to have social distancing, you have to wear masks. And so they talked about that, and they also talked about who was getting sick and why these diseases were not being recognized as COVID. Most of the COVID in Nicaragua is called suspicious pneumonia on the death certificates. We supposedly only have about 159 deaths in this country. That's entirely false. So how do we know what's happening? Well, we have the committee, but we also have a citizens observatory. And the Citizens Observatory that is now trying to identify cases, suspicious cases of COVID, trying to identify where there's deaths, and who's recovered, they are working in all the different municipalities of the country. They are actually an organization that began after the crisis, the political and social crisis began here in 2018. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But they set up citizens committees to identify violations of human rights. And so now these human rights defenders also work to identify and to help people who are suffering from COVID. A lot of the COVID is asymptomatic, or people have just a few symptoms and they don't have to go and report it anywhere. They just live with it, they get over it. And so they're carriers of the disease, or they're recovered. If they're carriers everywhere they go, they are spreading this disease. The woman who works in my house became ill shortly after I had surgery on my tendon de Achilles. And she had fever, she had a bad cold and cough. And I said to her, I think you have COVID, so you can't come to work anymore. And so for many, many months, she did not come to work for me. She definitely had COVID. She recovered from it. Another young man who's worked with my organization, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, he also came down with some of the symptoms of COVID. He immediately decided to go into quarantine, and he's a healthy person, and he prevented it from being spread to his family, and he's back at work. So a lot of people actually came down with COVID and had these kinds of asymptomatic or light cases, but many, many other people died. We have lost many doctors and other health workers, but this was never discussed by the government. We know this because of the reporting of independent doctors who have decided to study the situation. And we also know that the next profession that is most affected by COVID is the police department, because the police are at all of these mass activities that we've never stopped happening here in Nicaragua. We had Holy Week and all that goes on during Holy Week. Those of you who've been to Latin America know how important it is. Then we had the 19th of July celebrations for the anniversary of the revolution, and the government obviously did a lot of things around that. Then we had the September Fiestas Patrias, and the marches and the mass activities. And now we have the Purísima, the Concepción de María, which is the biggest holiday in Nicaraguan culture. And it goes on for 9 days. And so they had the novenas in some places, and they had the huge agglomerations of people on the main streets of Managua. And now we have Fiestas Navideñas, and people are again out on the streets. And so in the report that was made by the interdisciplinary committee on the 7th, they warned against what's happening. They warned against the fact that we're going to have another surge of COVID disease and death. And we're going to have much more COVID in young people than we had before. And the reason why is that the older people are taking care of themselves. The older people are wearing masks. The older people are staying at home. They are not out on the streets. And it's very hard for young people to stay in when all these activities are going on, right? We know how that is. And so we're concerned about the COVID, but we're also concerned about something else. We have a surge in other diseases that are also very important for us in this country. One of them is dengue. We have dengue clásico, and we have dengue hemorrágico. And people die from hemorrhagic dengue. We have malaria, and we didn't have malaria before. But in this last year, we've had outbreaks of malaria, and that's going to be a very serious problem on the east coast of Nicaragua, because they have more incidents of of malaria mosquitoes over there than we do here. And just to give you an idea, today I had 2 visits of people who were distributing a biologic that they put in the water. They used to put abate, which was a chemical, and now they use some sort of bacteria that they put into the water. So I have a pila. I have, where I wash my clothes, I have something called a pila, and they check to see if there are larvae in it, and then they put this biological in it. And then I had somebody else come by because in this sector, there is dengue. And I got them to tell me that that's why they were doing this. They were also out with the spray machines today in this neighborhood. So this is just a small neighborhood, but this is happening everywhere. And this is what the committee was warning about today, that we're going to have an upsurge, not only in COVID, but in these other communicable diseases carried by vectors, basically mosquitoes of different kinds. This could be Zika also. We could also have chikungunya coming up. But we don't know from the official statistics because there's no transparency. When I worked in Minza many years ago, one of the things that was really important was the People's Health Council, the Consejo Nacional de Salud, and also the epidemiological report that came out every week. That hasn't come out on a regular basis since 2009. So there's no way that we can really know statistics except for these independent doctors that are working in their own way to collect it. Similar to what Johns Hopkins and some other trackers are doing in the United States, so that you have data that is not sesgado. What's that word in English, Rebecca? It's so it's not influenced by what the government wants you to say, that you try to get the facts out to people.
The word is biased.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, I don't talk English very much, so you have to excuse me. Then the last thing I want to talk to you about, because you probably have questions, is the crisis, the social and political crisis that we've been living since the beginning, actually, since April of 2018. And that has affected me personally because my colleague and co-founder of CSIS, the Center for Information and Advisory Services in Health, which we set up in 1983, she was in a protest along with her daughter, accompanying some students who were protesting against a change in the Social Security law, which would affect people who were retired. And the police began attacking the young people who were demonstrating. Most of them were university students. And my colleague Anna tried to help somebody, and she was severely beaten. Maybe some of you saw pictures of a woman with white hair that had a beaten up face and head. That was my colleague Anna. She was severely injured. Her arm and wrist were broken. Her head had 17 or 18 stitches in it. And after that, Anna began to speak out much more and defend the people who were in the protests. Shortly after that, the government began attacking the protesters, the university students mostly, and many of them died or were in prison, and we still have political prisoners today. Some of them were released and then they're picked up again, but not as political prisoners. They're picked up for common crimes, so they can pick them up and they're not regarded as political prisoners. So one of the things that we are doing, as we've done since last year, is we're demanding the liberty of political prisoners. And that was a big campaign that we had last year, and now we're calling for the same thing this year. On International Human Rights Day, I was asked to make a statement for a women's group that's part of the People's Health Movement. And I spoke of the demand for releasing political prisoners, and especially the women that are being held prisoner, and the trans women who are held prisoner here, who suffer a great deal of discrimination, not just from the police officers, but even from other common prisoners who don't understand what's happening. This is Anna. She's was the director of our organization at the time that she was beaten up, and I was the president of the Junta Directiva. Last December, she was deported from Nicaragua. Yes, December of 2018, she was deported from Nicaragua. She lives and works in Costa Rica, and we have our own organization now in Costa Rica, which was set up on the 8th of March of 2019, International Women's Day. And so we work together from afar, trying to keep our organization alive here in Nicaragua, although we do not have our legal status anymore. That was taken away from us, along with 8 other organizations at the end of last year. So we are living in a situation where many, many people are suffering from the political, social, and economic crisis that began in 2018. And on top of that, we have the disasters that affected all of us all over the country. And we have COVID. And what we have is something a lot of people don't recognize in terms of these emergencies. And that's the mental health situation under which our people live. In this country, we discovered at the time of Mitch that people still had not been able to deal with their grief from the time of the war, of the wars for liberation of Nicaragua and the counter-revolutionary wars. People were suffering in many ways. They had mental health difficulties. And now with the economic and social situation, such as it is, the political situation, the fact that you cannot demonstrate on this, we have no rights to go out on the street and demonstrate. And now in the last few months, last few weeks really, new laws have been made to make it even more difficult for people to participate politically, because all monies that come from outside of Nicaragua are regarded as monies for external agents. They really do not want any money to be available for any political party except theirs to be able to be involved in the next elections, which should take place next year. We were demanding that elections be put up, that they be held during this year, but that was never agreed to, and it will never be agreed to because they have no political will to leave power. So we're not in an easy situation, but we have many networks of people working together, people who immediately responded. It was amazing. The government said the only collections could be done by the government. However, people began taking material aid to churches. And so finally churches were able to collect money, but particularly food and clothing and bedding for people on the east coast of Nicaragua. But it took a long time to send those trucks because all of the bridges and the roads were washed out because of the floods. So now finally, as I said before, we think that these natural disasters are really disasters created by human beings. Political unrest is not a natural disaster. It happens all over, but it's not a natural disaster. It's a man-made. usually man-made disaster. And climate change is a man-made disaster. Again, I say man-made because they're the ones that make the decisions about what's happening with the climate. And finally, COVID. And just to close, I know that there are probably questions, but I want you all to be aware, just like people were saying today at this press conference I was listening to, this disease is a very powerful, powerful virus, and it's going to be with us for a long time. And it's not going to be possible to live as we lived before. But what we are asking in Latin America is, do we want to live like we lived before? Do we want to live in a society where only a few have the greatest wealth and there's not a sharing of the wealth with the rest of the population? Do we want to live in societies where presidents and authorities are deliberately keeping help and medicines and assistance of any kind from their indigenous communities, such as is happening in Brazil, where they're deliberately cutting down the forests so that they can please the people who raise the cattle, where they deliberately are eliminating the quilombos, for example, in Brazil, because they're fighting against the huge multinational company that's destroying their land and mining their iron ore and other important metals. This is happening. Every single country in Latin America has mining concessions that are only serving to destroy Mother Nature. And so we want people to be aware that one of the things that we worry about is what is happening in the United States, what is happening to people there. We live in poverty. We know what poverty is. But what about all those people who are losing their jobs and are not getting any support from this government so that they can pay their rent before the end of the year or have food to eat on holidays when they want to be with their family? And so you, as people in the United States, I know are activists there, and it's really important that you see the connections between the destruction of capitalism and the very existence of the coronavirus, and the selfishness that's going into the whole business of the coronavirus. We have taken a stand on vaccines and the People's Health Movement, and Rebecca can put that up on the chat or make it available to you. We have a statement we have made about vaccines. Our health is a human right. It should not be a mercancía. It should not be a product to be bought and sold. And the same goes for vaccines. Vaccines should be available to all populations, regardless of their ability to pay for them. And so we are part of a worldwide effort to make sure that patenting of vaccines not happen. And this is being done with governments like the government of India and the government of South Africa and other people from governments of the European Union and social movements to make sure that people have a right to vaccines. They have a right to know and understand COVID, but they also have a right to vaccines. We don't expect to get vaccines here for a long, long time, but we will have herd immunity eventually because everybody is going to get sick. And so that's when herd immunity is created. But herd immunity, as you know, causes a lot of deaths if it's not met with all the other measures that mitigate COVID. So just try to see all of these situations as part of a whole. And that whole is that humanity does not realize its relationship to nature and destroys nature. And we have the opportunity to change this in our own lives and to change this in the lives of our children so that they can understand that we are nature, we are one. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It's so powerful and so important to hear from you, not only about the devastation, but about the resilience and the organizing, which I think doesn't reach media outside the country often, and especially in the US, but it's always happening. And it's really great to hear about it from you on the ground there. We're going to open it up for questions, and you can post your questions in the chat. But first, we're going to hear from Amy about the silent auction.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. I just want to remind everyone about the silent auction, which is still live and will be up until Monday at midnight. We have raised about $100 so far. We still have some items up for bid, like some great artwork, some children's books, some jewelry. I know you're not leaving your houses, but maybe you'd want to impress your household plants or pets with some jewelry. So yeah, feel free to go and bid on some items. We've got some good stuff up there, and thanks again for coming tonight.
And you'll notice in the chat that we've posted links to the different organizations that Maria was talking about. Okay, so as we open it up to questions, I think I'm going to ask one first. Maria, what is the situation for women with the displacement, with the COVID, with the hurricane and so on, and also with violence against women? Because I know that the COVID, for example, is leading to an enormous increase in that in the US and in other countries.
Definitely, as you saw in the first video, it was women speaking about what was happening to them, because they're the ones that are expected to pick up the pieces and get going again. So we know that the importance of women and the resilience of women is so important. And we also know that they have to be supported. And so the women's movement is present. It's present in Puerto Cabezas. It's present in the mining communities and other communities. It's present in the communities in Honduras and Guatemala as well. And the women's movement is very important in terms of the struggle for human rights and the struggle against gender-based violence in the home and the family. And we know that in our case, so many people are not confined to home. So it's not like it's in the countries where the person who is the violator is with the people in the family. In our case, what we find is that all through Latin America, we find that there's an increase in the use of alcohol, there's an increase in the use of drugs, and there's an increase of abuse against women. And we've talked about it in different forums that we have here in Latin America. But we also have, because of the women's movement throughout our countries, we have networks that do what is called psychosocial assistance to people. And so from the very beginning of COVID, we had the people who do they were also established and working even before the crisis that we had in 2018. But those networks were especially important because of all the suffering of the mothers who lost their sons, or their sons or daughters were put into prison. And so this network was already established for people who were involved in the political and social unrest. And so when COVID came along, they just started talking about COVID in their sessions that they were having. And since we can't meet in this country, even before COVID, we can't have meetings. a lot of this work is done online. And a lot of this work is done by learning skills online from people in different countries who are doing psychosocial work. And then the people in their own communities meet with 5 or 6 people in the community to give support to especially young women who are suffering the consequences of disease and of violence. So that's one thing. What was the other question?
No, that's it. Thank you so much. We have a question from Ray who says, you mentioned earlier that new laws are in place to stop people from participating politically. Is there a way to challenge these in court? Also, are there resources available for trans people?
Okay. Yes, there are organizations that provide assistance of different kinds to trans people. In fact, one of the things my organization did before in 2017 and 18, we had a school for trans persons so that they could learn how to defend their human rights. And there are a number of trans organizations that were established and also met with repression during the uprisings in 2018. About the laws. The laws are unconstitutional, but all of the powers of government are controlled by the dictatorship. So, for example, the 9 organizations that have lost our personería jurídica, our legal status in 2018, all of us have court cases. And these court cases are now in the Supreme Court. And they never will, they're one package. And there are a number of demands around each of the organizations, but they're one package that's in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court cannot act upon them because it's illegal to confiscate us. The only confiscation that is legal in Nicaragua is for crimes related to narco trafficking, to drug trafficking. So they can't act upon it because they know that all of the actions against us were illegal from the very beginning. No? But we have no way to contest that. So one of the demands that we have as organizations at the time of whenever there will be a change in the government, we will demand to have our legality returned to us and all of our properties returned to us. My organization has 2 buildings together here in Managua, and they've been occupied by the police since December of 2018. The police are there. It's the same way with the other human rights organizations, with the media of Carlos Fernando Chamorro and Miguel Mora. Their television stations and their media production is all under the control of the police. So there is no legal recourse for what they do, because when they pass these laws, they pass them in the legislature that is totally controlled by the dictatorship, which is very hard for me to say, because remember, I worked in the revolution. So it's quite distressing. But so there's not legal recourse, and it's taken to the United Nations and to the human rights organizations. And, we have we have cases all over the place, like the case of Anna, which is in the constitutional courts in Europe and so on. All of our situations are well known to international human rights organizations, but they are just allowed in here on the whim of the government. Sometimes they can come in, sometimes they can't come in. And they can make opinions on what these new laws are that are not constitutional, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been passed. So for example, at the present time, under this law that controls foreign agents, all NGOs are regarded as foreign agents because all of their money comes from outside of the of the country. It comes from the European Union and from USAID and from church organizations in Europe and US and Australia and New Zealand. And, you know, every NGO at the present time has to register. We always had to register, but now there are new requirements. There are 22 international NGOs in Nicaragua. Of those 22, only one has been certified by this government to really be operating here. They could send all of them away tomorrow, and it would be legal to do so because they haven't certified them. And in order to operate in this country, whether you're an international organization or a national one, you have to have certification from the Ministry of Gobernación, the Interior Department. And almost nobody has their certifications. So it's, and what happens is that if you're in an organization and you're receiving money from outside, and now with the new laws, there's a questioning about how you can continue to do that. It's very stressful. Talk about anxiety. Everybody is under the anxiety of what's going to happen in mid-January when this new law goes into full effect. And basically, the law is really aimed at the political parties, but it affects everybody who receives foreign assistance. Even the remesas are controlled. The remesas, you know, the money that's sent from the United States or Spain or wherever.
Remittances.
Remittances, thank you. I'm glad there are translators there. Yeah.
Well, Maria, as you talked about the challenges for NGOs, Elena had a question about the best way to support people there, since sending money to on-the-ground NGOs might be, or obviously is, problematic.
Okay. Yes, we had a big discussion about this within our friends that are mostly expats who are living here, who are married to Nicaraguans and work here. There are several ways. One way to get help to Nicaragua is through church organizations. I am sure that in the Catholic Church, and Jerry, you can find out about this, but the Franciscans, the Capuchins, are on the east coast of Nicaragua. And I sent up a video that was made by the priest from Puerto Cabezas. Maybe if you can find it, Rebecca. If not, I'll resend it to you so you can put it up. The priest in Bilwi, who is a Capuchin, talked about the help that they were providing. And of course, they're able to get help to the people. The Moravian Church is also collecting help, and they have a Moravian Church in the United States. And the United Methodist Church they are supportive of Acción Médica Cristiana that has been working on the East Coast for many years and actually runs the health centers on the East Coast with their doctors and health personnel. And they can receive the money through the United Methodist Church, and I can send that information. But if you look up Acción Médica Cristiana, you can find it on Facebook, and I think that the information is there. And we know that that gets to the people. Also, we have been trying to get help for the Lumen Christi sisters who run the Catholic school and convent in Bilwi, and they took that over from the Sisters of St. Agnes, who were there for many, many years, 75 years. And they are receiving funds through an organization in through the Catholic Church, but also through an organization in Minnesota that has a 503(c) or whatever it is you have to have. So there are ways to get support to Nicaragua, not directly to local people, but through those organizations who will make sure that the local people get it. And there are also people making sure that there's transparency in those organizations so that there's not corruption involved. Yeah.
Okay. We have a question, a very good question about COVID from Jerry, and I'm going to ask him to ask it directly. So take it away, Jerry.
Take it away.
Hola, Maria.
Hi there, Jerry.
Hello, everyone. I have been watching COVID in so many countries. It's a terrible pandemic no matter where. But I have to say, on a positive note, you must have done some very good training, because Nicaragua comes out looking fantastic by comparison to the other Central American countries. So I was kind of curious, because I look at the list of countries and I see, like, like Panama, they're number 42 on the list, or Costa Rica 51, Honduras 65, El Salvador is 92. And that's the list. They would say El Salvador has 40,000 cases today and over 1,100 deaths. Now, Nicaragua jumps all the way to number 139 on the international list, with a recording of only 5,000 cases and 162 deaths.
Yeah.
Like I say, anybody's death, any case is horrific, but I'm kind of proud of whatever you've done or whatever Nicaragua's doing, because it seems you have something that's working that other countries don't have.
Well, Jerry, I'm glad you asked that question, because those are the official statistics. The official statistics are not real. They're not real. And that's why you can read Spanish. And so I want you to go to the Observatorio. Actually, I think they publish some information in English. But I mentioned at the beginning that there was this Citizens Observatory that is collected information on repression before in 2018, and then they switched to dealing mostly with COVID. And they have a weekly report of what comes in from the people who are reporting to them from all over the country. So you will see the official report, you'll see what the government claims, and you'll see what the observatory claims that are actually the case. And as I said, ever since COVID came to Nicaragua, the doctors were not allowed to put COVID on the death certificate. They had to put pneumonia sospechosa. And so all of these people who were being buried in these nighttime burials were all COVID patients. The families knew they were COVID, and the authorities said, you have so much time to get them out of here, and you have to take the bodies directly to the burial place. They opened up new spaces in the public and the private cemeteries in order to bury the COVID patients. And that was happening in March, April, May. There was a lot of that. But if you look for their official death certificate, it doesn't say they died of COVID. Okay? And that's why the work of the observatory and the work of the interdisciplinary committee are so important. They put out in the interdisciplinary committee, they put out the official statistics for all the countries of Central America, including official from Nicaragua. And then they depend upon the observatory to give them the information, and also information independently from doctors who are reporting upon what is happening in their units. It would also be interesting for you, since you're interested in the theme, to look at that video that was made for the 7th of December by the Interdisciplinary Committee under videos on their website. So we're not as good as other countries. We just don't.
Well, I was thinking, I mean, apart from politics, that it's like Cuba. A lot of these countries have done a great number on healthcare that maybe some of the other countries have not done. For good or ill, you know, you could say perhaps Nicaragua's still better. I don't know in El Observatorio, you know, whether they're still better than other countries. I don't know. Or are you thinking it's pretty bad?
Well, I think it's pretty bad, but I think there are places that are much worse than we are. But like I say, in all of these countries, we have had health promoters since the 1960s. Right. So the people who are health promoters are the people who work in the Movimiento Comunal as community leaders around health. They've been doing prevention work. They can't come out. They work with the government, many of them. So they come out and give the information that's not coming out in the, at the beginning did not come out at all in the mass communications. But the people in the communities knew what they had to do to prevent this disease from ravishing their communities. But it wasn't because it was oriented by the Ministry of Health. It was because they had learned how to deal with these things earlier on. They know what to do about malaria and dengue and all of those things. So they just had to learn about this new virus and try to get people to distance and those kinds of things. And when people were sick, to get them to quarantine themselves. But that orientation never came from the government. It's sort of like Trump was here, right?
Well, thank you, Maria. I think we're about out of time. I'm sure if you have questions, you can send them to Rebecca to pass on to Maria. But I will hand it over to Rebecca to finish us off.
We'll leave the room open for discussion, but I will also, there's no audio? How about now? Is that better? Yep, okay. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Margie. And we will leave the room open for more discussion, but we also want to give another space to our musicians and to that spirit of music in our community. I do first want to, so the musicians can prepare their instruments or whatever they're going to share with us. I'm going to share that short video that Maria mentioned about the political prisoners and the call to free them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will go into music.
On International Human Rights Day, we send our fond greetings from Nicaragua. We particularly want to remember today the political prisoners that are being held here for their protests against the dictatorship, and in particular, the women who are prisoners, including a trans woman. We know that they suffered discrimination and humiliation in the prisons, not just from the guards, but also from other prisoners who don't understand why they are there and what they have done. So we ask for your solidarity. We demand the liberation of all political prisoners in this country before Christmas. My greetings to each and every one of you.
Okay, so thank you, Maria, for that reminder. If you are able to send a message, Maria, if you can send me a link to where we should be sharing these. I know that was yesterday, but it's a demand that we're asking every day. It's not only on the day of International Human Rights Day. So that is a reminder One little announcement before I forget, and thank you, Elliot, for reminding me. We have our annual planning meeting next year. And you're always welcome. It will be virtual. I don't think we will be able to meet in January yet in person, even if the vaccines are spread. There's a priority list right now, so we are not, well, definitely I'm not on that list, but hopefully soon. Everyone should make sure you have your flu shots and wash your hands and keep your distance and wear your masks. And it's all we can do for now to keep safe. But I'm going to hand it on to the musicians, and then we will come back and reunite. Who wants to go first, or Adolfo? Adolfo, you want Adolfo to go first? Okay, Adolfo, the room is yours. Adolfo, estás en mudo. Okay.
Okay, gracias por avisarme. Well, I just saying that I'm going to share with you a song by Víctor Jara. This song is called Plegaria a un labrador.
Levántate y mira la montaña, de donde viene el viento, el sol y el agua. Tú que manejas el curso de los ríos, que sembraste el vuelo de tu alma. Levántate y mírate las manos para crecer. Estrechada a tu hermano, juntos iremos unidos en la sangre. Hoy es el tiempo que puede ser mañana. Líbranos de aquel que nos domina en la miseria. Danos tu juicio de justicia e igualdad. Sopla como el viento la flor de la quebrada, limpias como el fuego el cañón de mi fusil. Hágase por fin tu voluntad aquí en la tierra. Tráenos tu fuerza y tu valor al combatir. Soplas como el viento la flor de la quebrada, limpias como el fuego el cañón de mi fusil. Levántate y mírate las manos para crecer. Estréchala a tu hermano, juntos iremos unidos en la sangre, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén. Amén. Amén.
Gracias. Excelente, Adolfo.
Gracias.
Seguimos, Jane. Hola, Jane. Seguimos con Elena y podemos seguir otra ronda si quieren.
Okay. Pues this is song, thank you so much, Adolfo, mil gracias. My inspiration for learning Spanish was Victor Jara, so I could sing his music. And I had studied French, and then when I heard his songs, and I heard his voice, and I heard his story, me juré aprender. I just decided I was going to learn so that I could sing his songs, because as long as we sing his songs, he's still alive. And then I became an interpreter, kind of from interpreting for all the solidarity things, and starting with a lot of DJPC stuff. And when right after becoming certified as an interpreter, I went to Guatemala, and I went to an indigenous international gathering that I went very last minute, and I thought that they would already have interpreters, and I thought, well, I'll just wash dishes or serve coffee to elders or whatever. But there weren't interpreters. There were only people who were bilingual, and nobody could interpret like at the ceremonies or meetings. So I became the interpreter, and I came home, and I had started this song, and it was kind of stuck, and I came home, and like in one day, the song flowed out. So it's called Puente or Bridge, and it's bilingual. And I want to dedicate it to all the people like Rebecca and myself and other people that work as interpreters as service. And so in this song, it talks about copal, which is a resin that's burned in ceremony. It's a tree resin, and we use it all the time in Mexico and Guatemala and for ceremonies. And also, there's a word at the end, Mactios, which is thank you in Quiche, Maya Quiche. So. Two hearts, two words that arise in between. Intention, connection, essence of meaning. Un puente, un suspiro, aliento que llena el espacio. Como una ala, brisa, brisa, caricia. Space between hearts, space between words. Here is a bridge, un puente. Here by the fire, smoke from copal touches all. Here is a bridge, un puente. North, south, center, awake to the dawn. Sunrise, clear skies, send out a call, un llamado sagrado. Juntos cumplimos el sueño de juntarnos, curarnos, sanarnos, amarnos. Space between hearts, space between words. Here is a bridge, un puente. Here by the fire, smoke from copal touches all. Here is a bridge, un puente. One dream, one prayer, in many tongues. One light shines bright. Grandfather's son, una ofrenda que se da de mi corazón con respeto, cariño, servicio divino. Space between hearts, space between words. Here is a bridge, un puente. Here by the fire, smoke from copal touches all. Here is a bridge, un puente. Eagle to águila, condor, quetzal. Thank you. Gracias. Magdioshu. So I hope the fan from my wood stove isn't too loud.
No, it sounds perfect. Absolutely perfect. How do people feel about listening a little bit more music? Yes? Yes? Vamos a compartir un poco más. ¿Quieren compartir un poco más, Adolfo y Elena? Yes, okay, let's go for it. Vamos, adelante.
Adolfo, ¿estás listo? Ya.
Adolfo, tienes que activar el micrófono, porfa. Gracias.
Ok, ahora sí. Gracias por acordarme. Lo que pasa es que si no lo pongo en mudo, se me hace un feedback acá en el... Pero ahora ya lo arreglé. Gracias, gracias. Qué linda canción, Elena. Me encantó. Me la quiero aprender, me la tienes que enseñar. Está súper linda. Quiero compartir algo del Uruguay. Para la gente que me conoce ya sabrán que a mí me gusta hacer un poquito de música de cada país. Especialmente me gusta compartir la música que no es muy conocida por estas latitudes. Hay un cantor que se llama Rubén Rada, que él es de Uruguay. Y quiero hacer una canción que se llama Sudáfrica. Es una canción en contra del racismo. Okay, acá está. Disculpe que no me la esperaba, no la tenía preparada, pero creo que la tengo por aquí. Y acá va. África. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz café. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz café. Hermanito blanco, no se olvide que yo tengo la sangre igualita a usted. Hermanito blanco, no se olvide que yo tengo la sangre igualita a usted. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Hermanito blanco, qué feliz seré cuando el hombre olvide su color de piel. Hermanito blanco, qué feliz seré cuando el hombre olvide de piel. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Que negros y blancos cante de una vez la canción deseada de la sensatez. Que negros y blancos cante de una vez la canción deseada de la sensatez. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. La 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 la. La 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 la. Amaraya, amani conte, a leche de coco, arroz y café. Gracias, gracias.
Gracias, Adolfo. Muchísimas gracias. Bellísima. Bellísima canción. Ándale, Elena.
Pues, I know that muchos de ustedes conocen la canción Gracias a la Vida por Violeta Parra, and that song, there was another really important song and musician for me, learning about her and listening to her. And y su canción dice, Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto. And so I wanted to write a song kind of in homenaje a ella, and also just to, also in gratitud, because for me, gratitude is like one of the best medicines, and Mother Earth is one of the best medicines too. And one of the things, una de las cosas en COVID is that because I haven't had a lot of work, I've had a lot more time to go out birding and stuff. And so I wrote this song a while ago. It's called Gracias a la Vida. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida. She says, gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, thanks to life that has given me so much. And my homage to her and my homage to mi madre la tierra is thanks to the earth that has given me life. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida, gracias al espíritu, el amor, la energía, gracias a mis primos que me dan alegría, gracias a todos que formamos familia. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida, al agua sagrada, la sangre bendita que corre en sus venas, el arroyo y el río. Gracias a todos que formamos familia. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida, a los seres verdes que se cultivan, gracias al maíz, la mies tan amadita, desde cada raíz hasta la última hojita. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida, al aire y el viento que por la tierra suspiran, como cantan y ríen, con gritos o risa, fuerza de tormenta, ternura de brisa. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida, al sol que calienta, la luz que brilla, la luna que cambia, cada mes, cada día, el ciclo del cielo, ritmo de la vida. Gracias a la tierra que me ha dado la vida. Y gracias a todos ustedes. Thanks to all of you, and thank you, Rebecca, for all of the work on all of this.
Gracias, Elena. Thank you. Thank all of you for being here tonight. I mean, DJPC is here because of you, because of the support you give us in many ways. So I really, really appreciate that commitment you have to DJPC. I want to remind you that we have our annual planning meeting session, we're calling it now. We're going to split it in two halves. And we always like to hear from you on what you want us to be doing. We had a lot of plans for this year that would cut off by the pandemic. However, we have been able to continue our solidarity work in many ways. Through the work that of supporting NISGUA, the network in solidarity with Guatemala, with the third country agreement issues, trying to, like, that campaign is to stop this policy that sends people that are trying to get refugee status in the US to a third country, which is Honduras, El Salvador, or Guatemala, who do not have the conditions to take any more people. So that's a campaign that we've been involved. We are also been involved a lot with the SOA Watch, as you know, over the years, and through many years, but also this year we were able to do our encuentro virtually through a series of events. And that reminds me that tomorrow there is the Café y Té that you're more than welcome. Is an informal space to share and to try to see what we want to do in the near future. I mean, there was a whole strategic session last year, but the staff collective really wants to hear from community, like where they should be going or where we should be going. So I want to remind you of that. It was in the email I sent. I'm trying to find the graphic to see the details, but yeah, so it's tomorrow morning. For us, it would be noon. So from noon for an hour and a half, you can come in. There's a registration page that is in the email that I sent out today. I'll just put this one because I can't find the other graphic, but I want to remind you that we have been, DJPC has been very active supporting the work of the SOA Watch. And many of you already know that I am on the council, and at the moment I'm the chair of the council. But anyway, I see it more horizontal, but anyway, if there's ways that you want to bring the conversation to that, also feel free to let me know. So those are like a couple of things apart from awards night, Build for Peace that this year we were able to do. Even though we thought we were not going to be able to do, we did a Build for Peace in the Westward Community Garden with Revision. We harvested tomatoes. This is a community that is majority Latinx or Hispanic and relies a lot on this communal garden for their food security. So even with the pandemic, we've been able to do little things, and the work that I do is because of your support, and I really want to thank you for that. And I want to thank our board of directors that are very committed. Elliot had to leave, but Amy and Lynn are here. And in Preston, I see you hiding over there. So the childs. So I really, really want to thank them for their trust and how I have decided to lead the organization in the vision of bringing voices from the South to our communities here. So I'm going to stop there, but I want to, and we've been here for a while, but I want to leave the room open for you. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and have a conversation. Also, I want to make sure, Amy, we have some pictures of the event. Yeah, some screenshots. Yeah, nowadays we do screenshots to get our thing. So also want to thank Elena with KGNU, who's a partner with us in struggle. We should continue supporting KGNU Community Radio here in Denver and in other places where we have our hearts, where there's community radio. As you know, we had Bertita Zuniga Cáceres, the daughter of Berta Cáceres, for awards night, and their community radio is awesome. They're really active. I mean, I'm not saying KGNU is not, but I mean, these people are in the front, on the front ground. So I really admire everyone that has involvement in community radio. So I'm gonna stop there. I think I've said everything, but I want to open the room for anyone that wants to say anything or share anything, share poetry, share whatever you want to share. We have a few more minutes to go.
Rebecca, can you just mention that this was recorded, I assume, and yes, people can listen later?
Thank you, Margie. Yes, we are recording this session. It's actually live right now on YouTube, and it's supposed to do an automatic save, but I'm also recording it on Zoom, and we'll do some editing later on for just have short pieces, but the whole thing is on YouTube right now. And I'm gonna stop the recording so we can just have an open space, so it's not, you know, so all of those of you over there watching us live, thank you so much for being here tonight. And we'll see you soon. We hope you can join us for the planning meeting so we can